Hey guys, it's been a little while since I've done a project paintball marker video, but just wanted to show you what I'm working on this time. I've got a customer's, well, it looks like an earlier vertical feed Shocktech hookup. So it does not have a removable feed neck, and you can see the milling here is kind of distinctive of the hookup series. It looks like an earlier Shocktech HPR and LPR. And it looks like most of this stuff is the original pneumatics, Shocktech Bomb 3-way. And this one hasn't been played with in a while. It's actually in pretty rough shape internally. I aired it up a little bit ago, and I didn't do a video, but it's leaking heavily from the HPR and LPR. Those are probably going to both need to be either replaced or rebuilt. And another issue, you can see the trigger is really sticky here. It almost doesn't even spring back on its own. So I'm going to have to tear down the trigger frame probably and do some polishing, and then take a look at the 3-way to see if that needs to be redone. And then I think the owner said he may have a full front block that he wants to switch this out for. So I'll do a couple videos along the way to show my progress. So I tore it all the way down, even emptied out the body, took out the valve, and gave this old girl a bubble bath to get all the old grime and oil and nasty stuff out of the inside of the body. And it cleaned up pretty good. You can see the anodizing is actually in a really good shape. Just some light surface scratches, nothing too terrible. But no big nicks or gashes or anything. One thing of note is that I discovered that the stiffness in the trigger is actually, the frame is fine. You can see it's actually really smooth. I polished it up a little bit just to make it smoother, but the issue is actually with the 3-way. It's hard to do with one hand, but this the 3-way shaft is extremely stiff in here. So I think these O-rings have swollen, and they're just causing too much friction in there. So we may not even end up using that. Another note on that is that just a kind of a public service announcement, guys. Don't ever use Locktite to secure the 3-way to the front block. This thing had thankfully it wasn't red Locktite, it was blue, but this thing, I almost could not get this 3-way out of the front block. It was so gummed up with Locktite. You don't even need these to be tight in the front block, they just need to be screwed in as far as you can. And then it's okay if they wiggle a little bit and float, as they call it. I mean, even Glenn Palmer himself says it's better for them to have a little free play so that they don't leak as much then, actually, because they have more free play. So took off this with LPR and the RAM because the owner wants to use other parts. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Oh, also I rebuilt the HPR, and it was actually super easy to do. It was one of the easiest HPRs to rebuild I've ever done. So that actually is leak-free, and it seems to be performing really well, so we may end up using that as well. So, and more later. Alright guys, this is a third and probably final video for this project. I do have the front block pneumatics all mounted up and looking good. It is gassed up right now and there's no leaks. You can hear it's just very silent. I'll go ahead and cycle it a few times to show you that it's working good. As awkwardly as I can with my thumb there. One thing I ran into with this, which is kind of common with certain makes of autocockers, down here you can see the original, might be kind of hard to see. Come on, buddy. Basically the hammer lug. This is the lug that the sear catches on with each cycle. And this one is a very rounded type. You can see right here, it's a very rounded edge, and what that means is that you have to drop the hammer lug. You have to screw it much farther down than a normal lug, and so in order to get a good time on the gun, this has to be relatively low. Otherwise, the gun will actually cycle and not always catch, and that's when you end up with things like they call brapping or farting, where this the back block actually is not, or the hammer is not actually catching, and the back block is basically just letting this ride forward with it, and it's not a full velocity shot. So This is generally considered to be not the best hammer lug to use. Instead, you want to use one that's more square. I know this isn't focusing very well because it's just a camera phone, but you can see, come on buddy, that it's more of a squared off edge here, and that lets you more precisely tune where that catches and where in the trigger pull it releases. So highly recommend any autococker you're working on, you use a squared off lug like that. It's recommended by many of the professional techs these days. So this one's pretty much ready to go. I'll probably spend a little bit of time just getting velocity in the ballpark, but otherwise it's pretty much ready for the owner.